You must do the thing you think you cannot do. Eleanor Roosevelt. Eleanor Roosevelt was my hero from the time of childhood. And that question that we get sometime about who would you like to go to lunch with, living or dead, if you could, Eleanor is definitely my person, although I think if I went to lunch with her, I'm not sure we would sit still and actually eat. Her first date with Franklin, she took him on a tour of the slums of New York. That's how she impressed him. And that's how she told him who she was. If you marry me, you're not going to get somebody who sits still. You must do the thing you think you cannot do. For me, that thing for most of my life was swimming. I was deathly afraid. And if any of you have had that experience or you know someone who's deathly afraid, it really is deathly afraid. It really is, there's nothing beneath me. There's nothing to keep me from sinking. I don't know what's under that water. You go through all of the fears about drowning. In fact, for so long, I could only imagine myself drowning. And finally, when I finally was in the process that would lead me to learn to swim, one of my friends, who was an outstanding swimmer, said to me, "You have to be able to imagine yourself swimming. If you can only imagine yourself drowning, you will never learn to swim." So that was a revelation to me. So I want to talk about learning something that is difficult and that carries with it great fear, and using that learning, which is often a physical activity, as a metaphor for the rest of our lives. To say, if I can do that, if I can do the thing I thought I could not do, then I can do this, and I can do anything, which is what swimming has been for me. So I'm going to start back before a lot of you were born, back in 1965, when I was about 7 years old. It was the time of the Watts riots. My family was living in Watts, and I had a lot of fears. It was a fearful time. It was an exciting time. Open housing had just passed through Congress. Voters' Rights Act, the Voting Rights Act had just passed through Congress. Things were happening in the South, where my parents were from. Before the Montgomery bus boycott, there had been the Baton Rouge bus boycott in the 50s, where my mother was from. So things were moving and things were exciting. And even though we were in Los Angeles, it was palpable with possibilities. So this was the context for me both wanting to learn how to swim and fearing. When I asked my mother why she and my father didn't know how to swim and why they never took us swimming, the answer that came was, well, she said, we grew up in cities. I grew up in Baton Rouge, your father grew up in New Orleans, and in cities, most kids learn to swim in pools, and we were not allowed to go to the pools and to learn to swim. So we didn't learn, and we're still afraid of it. But here we are, we're in Los Angeles, we would like our children to learn. After the riots, like a lot of people who had any means at all or any resources to leave Watts, my family did, and we moved into the glorious, upcoming, new neighborhood where our lives would be carefree of Crenshaw. And if any of you know Boys in the Hood, I knew every single reference. It was like, oh, that's the funeral home where they buried Dad. That's where, every place, including down to the little Catholic girlfriend in her uniform who was trying to keep her virginity. Because a lot of our parents sent us to Catholic school to try to keep us safe. So it's 1965. We move into Crenshaw, and lo and behold, not far away, there's this big, fabulous pool, a public pool. It's all glass, and it's so beautiful. And we desperately want to go there and learn how to swim. So our parents take us. Most of the parents in the neighborhood were then from Louisiana and from Texas. And they take us to the pool. And the pool is still mostly white. We were kind of in the middle of white flight. So some of the whites a little bit to the west of us hadn't yet flown. And they were still at the pool, and all of the lifeguards were these beefy, mostly high school students, white guys, all men, who were not keen to teach swimming to African American, Japanese American kids. And who knows, maybe they hadn't been keen to teach it to white kids either. But we felt it very, very personally. So it was the Teddy Roosevelt School of Learning to Swim. You stood on the side, and if you didn't jump, they gave you a push. It wasn't a nice push. I was one of the kids who went under, came up in a complete and total panic, had to be grabbed, put on the side where I stood shivering and crying in my little swim cap. Because, of course, if any of you know about the issues of African Americans and hair, that was part of why we didn't swim either, because swimming was going to destroy your hair. So we had our caps, elaborate affairs. My family, when we went to the beach, we lived only maybe 45 minutes from the beach, but we packed for 3 days to go to the beach. We went once a year. It was like we were almost taking our annual pilgrimage to Louisiana. It involved so much packing and so much food and so many relatives. But nobody swam. We went to the water's edge, we played with the waves, we played with the water. It was glorious, but no one actually could swim. Later, 1968, when my cousins, when a lot of other things were happening that were tragic, of course, King's death, Kennedy's death right there in Los Angeles, our cousins moved from Crenshaw. They had preceded us into Watson, into Crenshaw. They moved way out to Whittier, east of the city, where people didn't really know that they were black. So they started to have new experiences, and one of them was swimming. They got to learn other things. They got to learn to swim. So we started going to our annual beach parties, and they would be way out in the water, especially this one cousin who was younger than me, way out. And the parents would be so afraid, calling him back in. They were so sure he was going to drown, and he just was having a great time. And then we came across a family in our community that had a pool in their backyard. And they were a Texas family. And they not only could swim, they could golf, they could ski, they could ice skate, they played tennis. It was a complete revelation to us that we could actually do these things, and these things were the cause of great fear. So here I am, I'm deathly afraid. The only other experience I have as a child besides the lifeguard pushing me is being at a hotel pool with my brother and not realizing how soon it became deep. So I'm grabbing onto him and pulling him down. My father is kind of helpless at the side. Finally, he sees something he can extend to pull me out. And this is the beginning of me being paralyzed with fear. I absolutely could not do anything about until I was an adult. When I was an adult, so I'm about 21, and I decided, this fear has been holding me back. It's the thing I cannot do. It's the thing I am most afraid of. It's the thing that if I can do this, I will be able to do anything. So I took myself down to Los Angeles City College pool, which had a wall around it, so it was completely private, but it had no roof. And you could swim at night, and you could see the stars, such as they were in Los Angeles at that time, depending on how smog it was. And the steam was rising off the water, so it was beautiful. I took myself down there to learn how to swim, but it took me a year of clinging to the side, first in shallow, and then in the deep end, to get up the courage to let go of the side. This is how afraid I was. I would sing to calm myself down. And finally, the pool manager started taking interest in me, and he came over and he said, "You're a pretty good singer. Have you ever thought of doing it for a living?" And I'd say, "Oh, Bill, I'm going to be an Olympic swimmer. I don't have time to pursue a career in singing. And he would say, you're never going to swim. You're never going to swim. You're holding on to the wall. You're never going to swim. Who are you kidding? And it was a kind of teasing that I appreciated because my family teased in the same way. And I said, I'm going to show you. And later on, he ended up showing me. He saw that I was determined, and he showed me. And the way he showed me at first is he said, look at all the swimmers in the pool. Who do you think is the best? And I said, oh, the mailman, of course. The mailman was from Hawaii, and he had all these muscles, and he had power, and he just kind of blazed through the water. And he said, no, it's not the mailman. He said, the mailman's using so much energy. He's wasting so much energy. He's got all that power, and he's not getting anywhere. He said, look at that girl in that lane there. Look at that young woman in that lane. She's not making any splashes. It's so smooth. She's so relaxed. And she's going farther than the mailman with every stroke. Can you see it? So I watched her. And I learned first by watching the people who could swim. And then, of course, the next great challenge was to relax. How many of us who've been so afraid of something have been told, you just need to relax? And when you're a young person, you have no idea what it means to relax. I had no idea until somebody told me, you have to breathe. You have to breathe. You have to just take a step, and you have to just breathe. The water will hold you up. I found out it was true. No matter how hard I tried to drown, I couldn't. You must do the thing you think you cannot do, and then use that in your whole life. Say, wow, if I can do that thing, I can do anything. Thank you.